This week in our class, we are going to talk about observing learning and teaching in the second language classroom. And then we'll dive into cooperative learning tasks as well. So make sure before you do this that you have started out by filling out the Compare Learning Context chart and then have that with you as you watch because it'll help you decide where your answers fit and understanding those just a little bit more. So if you haven't, push pause before you move on. So first of all, we'll talk today about natural versus instructional and communicative settings as we teach second language acquisition. So making sure we have an understanding of each of these, and then we'll dive in just a little bit more. So natural settings are those settings where the learner is exposed to the language at work or in a social interaction as a child in the home. In a school setting where most of the other children are native speakers of the target language, or where the instruction is directed toward the native speaker rather than toward the learners of the language. So that's supernatural. They're able to interact in the language and in natural context. The second type of setting is the structure-based setting, and these are environments where the language is taught to a group of second language learners. This is a classroom, maybe a Spanish 1 or Spanish 2 or a French or German classroom. The focus is on the language rather than on the messages carried by the language. The teacher's goal is to see to it that the students learn the vocabulary and the grammatical rules of that language. For some, there are opportunities to continue learning the target language outside the classroom, but for most or others, the only contact they have with the language is inside that classroom, and the goal is to pass an exam rather than daily communication. And then the third type is communicative, content-based, and task-based instruction. These environments involve the learners where the goal is learning the language itself, but the style of instruction places emphasis on the interaction, the conversation, and the language use rather than on the learning about the language. And then in content-based teaching, it usually focuses on the subject matter which they are learning through the medium of a second language. A lot of our dual immersion programs will teach math or science within the context of the second language. The emphasis is on using the language rather than on talking about learning the language. Students in these courses are successful based on their ability to get things done in the second language rather than on accuracy. And so basically that's the communicative and content-based. So let's dive in just a little bit to the natural acquisition settings. And you'll want to make sure you've completed the chart as we go through this, and then at this point start comparing your chart to these bullet points. So in the natural acquisition setting, when second language learners learn languages at work or in social interactions or on the playground, their experiences are often quite different from learners who are just there in the classroom to learn the language. So look at your patterns of plus and minus signs and see how these marks relate to natural language settings. So in the natural language setting, the language is not presented step by step, but rather the learner is exposed to a wide variety of structures. Learner errors are rarely corrected if there is an understanding, and the learner is surrounded by the language for as many hours of the day as possible. The learner encounters a number of people who use the language proficiently, and so they can model after them. And they observe or participate in many different types of language events, greetings, commercial translations, arguments, workplace interactions, and so forth. Language use is required to actually respond to questions, to get information, to survive in that environment, and emphasis is on meaning and getting meaning across clearly. Modified input is available in many one-on-one conversations, but it's not a big focus or feature of the natural acquisition setting. All right, let's now look at your column of structure-based instructional settings. And in this, please make sure that you look at those bullet points and compare that. The structure-based setting is maybe where grammar translation approaches. There's a considerable use of reading and writing as learners translate text from one language to another, and grammar rules are taught explicitly in this section. To learn mainly through repetition and habit formation is the idea. So the linguistic terms are present and practiced in isolation one at a time in a sequence based on simple to complex. Errors are corrected frequently and accuracy is given priority over meaning. Learning is often limited to a few hours a week, usually an hour a day or so in their class, and they have they're not speaking the target language outside of that. The teacher is often the only native or proficient speaker that the student has contact with. And the student experiences a limited range of discourse types, mostly initiation, response, and evaluation, and that's usually from the teacher. The teacher initiates something, asks for a response, and then evaluates that response. The written language they encounter is often just provided as practice on grammar, and the students often feel pressure to speak or write from the beginning correctly. And the target language is generally modified in order to ensure comprehension and compliance. It's not as natural. And then the final type is the communicative instructional settings. And in these settings, the emphasis is on communication of meaning, both between the teacher and students and among the students, in order like pair or group work. Grammatical forms are focused on only in order to clarify meaning. And the assumption is that you focus on meaning, learners will acquire the language in a way that is similar to the natural acquisition. So this is kind of a blend between the two. So some key factors here: input is simplified and made comprehensible by the use of context, props, gestures, rather than like the structure of grading. Limited amount of error correction and meaning is emphasized over form in these types. And there's limited time for learning and little time to produce the language in class, except in maybe like an immersion program. Usually only the teacher is fluent in that target language, but students have lots of opportunities to interact with others and to talk and communicate and make meaning. A variety of authentic materials and strategies are focused on, and the practice of social, linguistic, and functional features happen through role play. There is little pressure to perform at a high level of accuracy in these settings, and modified effort is a definite feature of this approach because the teacher makes every effort to speak at the level of language that the students can understand. This is something that we encourage in our district. The more authentic the learning, the more time that students have to communicate and dialogue, the more they're able to acquire that language in a similar way to the natural acquisition. So moving forward on this, we've got a couple of assignments that I would like you to do in between this and the next section. So you've got two different assignments. I would like you first to do the classroom comparison. That's a Google Doc. You're going to see some teacher to student, student to student interactions on that Google Doc. And I want you to read through that and determine what types of errors you see that the teacher makes, the student makes, and how those errors are corrected. What are some of the genuine questions that are asked that maybe don't have a specific answer? And then what are the display questions that might be asked that do have a specific answer? And how is meaning negotiated? And then what are the comments that help support the meta-linguistic learning that transform information? And I've put those definitions at the top of that assignment to make sure you do that as well. Make sure you fill in both charts. When you're done with that, I would like you to read a section on looking at different structures of corrective feedback. And I've assigned everyone a different section, so you'll need to pull that up and find your section and the page number. Read through that. It's only about 2 or 3 paragraphs. And then kind of summarize that in your own words, in maybe some common language that helps each of us understand. And as part of the discussion, I would like you to record yourself discussing that with the class. And so you can use your phone and upload that. You could use YouTube. Your QuickTime on your computer is a great way to do it. You may use Screencast-O-Matic, which is what I'm using here. Try something different and fun and put yourself out there, but it's only 2 minutes, so make sure you can summarize and teach that in just 2 minutes. And then you'll see on the discussion that I would like you to watch all of those and respond to at least 3 by the end of the week. So go ahead and start those, and then when you're finished, look at the next video and we'll dive into the SIOP model and the cooperative learning model as well.